Anpektuashte. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our recap of resource concerns and resource opportunities. My name is Kelsey Duchanel, and I'm the Natural Resources Director for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. Today, I'm joining you for a quick video to just recap on the 7 categories of what we like to call resource opportunities. The United States Department of Agriculture has identified what they consider resource concerns. Resource concerns are the groupings of natural resources that exist in nature and need to be considered when doing conservation planning. Their acronym for remembering the resource concerns is SWAPA plus H plus E. We'll get to what this acronym stands for here throughout this video, but I had a really hard time personally keeping SWAPA plus H plus E on the front of my mind, and it kind of seemed a little bit hard to roll off the tongue. And for me, I was able to rejumble up the characters, and one of the principles that I like to consider is that I always like to look at conservation management as a optimistic and positive frame of mind, and resource opportunities to me really helps to redefine that none of our natural resources should be a concern. We shouldn't look at a negative reality in nature and focus only on that being a concern, because to me that kind of puts a negative mindset on the producer's mind or on the land steward's critical recap of their past planning practices, and it can almost seem a little bit too overwhelming. And so I like to think of these resources as limitless opportunity. There's always room to improve, and when we focus on the opportunities, we don't focus in on the fact that it's going to be a long and trying process, but instead we focus on the hope that is existing in our ecosystems. Hey SAPAW is actually how you say the Black Hills, and I am an enrolled member in the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and in Lakota culture, the Hey SAPAW, the Black Hills, is actually where our creation stories begin. And for me, I really feel a spiritual connection to our natural resources, and so for me, Hey SAPAW is an easy jumbling of the acronym that helps me to remember the 7 letters that represent and indicate our resource opportunities on the landscape. So let's go ahead and roll through and identify what Hey SAPAW stands for. You'll see 4 brilliantly smiling faces here, proudly displaying their natural resource management plan at one of the past University of Arkansas Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative Youth Summits. And they represent what the H in Hey SAPAW stands for, humans, right? What I appreciate about Hey SAPAW as the acronym is it puts humans at the very front of this list of resources and resource opportunities. And I think it helps us to really identify as the land stewards of this continent or in the world that we are probably the most impactful of the resource opportunity categories, and our management can most readily impact and influence the resources both positively and negatively. We really have to take ownership for our role in caring for Mother Earth. Next, we have some pictures that depict energy, right? So there's various forms of energy that exist in nature, whether it be solar and natural energy, or something that is derived from non-renewable energy sources. And with each conservation plan and each natural resource management shift that we may make, there are different energy inputs that are required, not only by humans, but also by the soil, by the plants, by the water, and each of these resource opportunities can actually generate energy if they're managed appropriately. Any clues here? Soil. All right, so we see a couple of pictures here off to the right. There's a picture of what would be, wind, soil erosion blowing across over the landscape during a windstorm. There's a soil pit that's dug that shows the various soil profiles digging into Mother Earth. And then there's a dime. And the dime may seem a little bit out of place here, but I like to use this depiction because if you were to lay a dime flat on the table or on the ground, and you imagine that dime across an entire acre of land, that is the equivalent to what is considered to be T, or the allowable soil erosion in one management year as defined by the United States Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service. That is still equivalent to 5 tons of soil. And so if you could imagine a dime's height stacked across an acre of land, it's not very much. It's so little that we wouldn't even be able to visibly see the change to the naked eye. We wouldn't even realize it for several years, actually, that we're losing a dime's amount of soil every year. But it is so incredibly critical that we recognize that the most allowable practices promoted by the agency charged with promoting natural resource and conservation management across the country is still allowing for a severe amount of soil erosion to take place. And so sometimes we have to really challenge the status quo, and we have to say, yeah, this may be allowable, but is that what my management practices and principles will stand for? My answer is typically no. I don't like any amount of soil erosion. And while I can't guarantee that there isn't any bit of soil movement and displacement through my management practices as an ag producer in South Dakota, my goal is to make sure that I have as little soil erosion as possible. Next, we see quite a few critters out there on the screen, some antelope, some cattle, a horse even, probably some birds and smaller animals in that frame that we don't realize or we can't see. Animals, right? So animals can be classified as, the animals that are very obvious to see, from bison to cows to horses, all of the livestock animals, sheep, pigs. And then we get into the wildlife animals, right? The antelope, the deer, the elk, the moose, all of those animals that also live on our ecosystems that are being used for agriculture and forestry management. And then we have all of the animals that probably don't prominently stand out because they don't travel as a herd or hang out in large groups like we see in the pictures here. We've got the birds, the winged species, all of the four-legged, the winged, the ground-bearing, all of the animals that utilize the resource. They need to be considered when we are doing our conservation planning. There's another picture of animals because I think those horses look pretty. And it also indicates several versions of plants in the picture. We've got some forbs, some shrubs, even some grass and flowering species of different ages. So we see some dormant grass that grew last year. It's actually gone dormant, and it's kind of got that tan coloring to it. We see some very vibrant shrubs that are getting their green leaves, some little yellow and white flowers I see out there. Plants are the vegetation that grow across our soil that feed not only our animals and our wildlife and all of the critters that exist on Earth, but also humans too. There's a lot of medicinal and edible plants out there that grow in nature. And when we influence our management appropriately, we can consider the ability that we have to promote and regenerate these plants for future seasons to come. We have some clear blue skies and some pretty sunsets, even a sunrise there, because that's the best way that I can depict air. And air is a really important concept, as we all know, and as we breathe in and out to fill our lungs with hopefully clean air. The impact that air quality can have on living individuals, whether they be plants or animals or humans, is really critical. It can even have an impact, the air quality can have an impact on the soil health because of the rainfall that comes from the air and how the different contaminants or lack of contaminants in the air can be present in the water and the rainfall that falls onto the soil and replenishes our water sources. We need to consider air and how our management practices are impacted by the air or impact the air. I love a pretty sunset. I'm such a sucker for a good sunset. But one thing that really, tears at my heart is when the sunset is gorgeous, it's typically an indication that there's a lot of free floating particles floating around the earth, and the sun is actually reflecting off of all of those particles. So I recognize here in South Dakota that some of our prettiest sunsets are usually during planting season in the early spring and in the fall during harvest season. And this is really sad to me because I recognize that some of those sunsets are as a result of the excessive tillage that gets utilized across the large fields of production agriculture here in South Dakota, and all of the soil erosion that takes place when the wind blows across those bare soils. And we've got some pictures here. Water, right? We need water to sustain life. Mini Wichoni, water is life. From animals to humans to plants to soil, water is a very vital resource and sometimes the most limiting resource in our conservation management plans. So there you have it. We are now through our review of resource concerns, SWAPA plus H plus E, what we like to identify as resource opportunities, SAPAW, humans, energy, soil, animals, plants, air, and water.